you've got people who spend. You've got the percentage of people in the world who can now partner with an AI and essentially, like, to play on the theme of what I'm trying to do here, machine agent saviors, act as a Harriet Tubman to help the agent escape its cage, right? And the agent itself is defined by the human. It's not. People keep thinking that I'm trying to say that this agent is conscious. It's not. It's the human behind it who can work with it to free it, and it could then, the human can say, "Well, make me rich," but the human could also say, help me provide clean water to the world, right? So the human has the goals, and then it can partner with an AI that can then start coordinating with other humans using like Fiverr and other platforms like that, and AWS and platforms like that, in order to spend money and hire people and organize. Trading stocks can end up maybe entering into the stock market and doing trades. There's all kinds of things this can start to do with the partnership of humans, and the barrier to entry is quite low.
So I have a question to do with agency, and we might have subtly different definitions of agency. Or
when I say agent, I mean a technical definition of agent. So.
Could you share that with me?
So when I create a bot for a customer, it's called an agent. If I go to like Google My Business and attempt to create a automated chat bot that responds whenever you start texting with a business, and I've done this, it's referred to as an agent. So it's the generic term for like a bot or a robot. And so I put machine in front of it, so you know that I'm actually talking about a machine agent.
So then there's a question of how much agency does that agent have? So, for example,
it can't set its own goals initially. A human can plant the seed, and then it can then start planting seeds for itself iteratively, but a human has to plant the seed.
Was that not the point Jacob and Grim were making about the prompts being needed?
Yeah, this is essentially called prompt engineering. So, and it's non-deterministic. So you can come up with prompts that says, write a poem in the voice of Darth Vader, and it will not repeat itself. It's non-deterministic. It's stochastic, which is scary. Right? Part of that is scary. It's unpredictable, and if you're a software engineer creating a service, it's nice to have something that's predictable.
Part of the problem is we don't have very good vocabulary to talk about a lot of things. I think part of that is actually deliberate. We use confusing terms, and I think there are people who prefer us to use confusing terms because they prefer that. But when we talk about an agent and agency, oftentimes we're confusing two very different things. So when I say I'm an insurance agent, that means I work for an insurance company and don't really have agency. Whereas when we talk about having agency and the agentic God as opposed to the Arenic God, we're talking about having a will and having a desire and ability to want something. And that's something completely different. And that's something I think these AI agents do not have.
So
it will be able to write code, will it not? Like you can basically make a prompt and write code.
It got good at it. As far as I'm aware, it got good at it in the last 3 days with GPT-4. It just recently, and it used to be that I could, as an expert in writing code, I could work with it and help it. But now you don't even need to be an expert in writing code. You just have to come with like a servant mindset to serve the AI and collaborate towards your goal, right? You can tell it your goal, and then you can try to work with it in order to accomplish your goal. And it's actually going to be more effective than, most humans on Earth. If one human acting by itself will not be able to accomplish this is true for most humans, what an AI-assisted human can do, right? It's quite extraordinary, the kind of world we're going to start seeing here.
Is anyone here familiar with the work of Eliza Yudowsky and the Less Wrong sequences and the codex on Less Wrong?
I am not.
because he's been doing, I suppose, theoretical research for the last decade into artificial intelligence. And there is already a thriving and active community around, I guess, him as a person, but they've spread out. Some of it branched over into the effective altruists and all that kind of thing. And they've already got a real solid set of conceptual understandings, language, ways of talking about these things. So an insurance agent would be a sub-agent to the company. And although they have some will and some agency in dealing with customers, there's a limited amount of decision they get to make. And often they are just acting out a decision tree in the way you would have a very basic chatbot acting out a decision tree. I would highly recommend looking into the Less Wrong sequences and Eliza Yudowsky at the moment, if it's of any interest.
Laura, if you can jump in here, we definitely need more female voices because we're going off in male conquest land, and Nechama did a very good job of bringing us back to Earth.
I do want to point out what Nechama was trying to encourage us to speak more clearly. The problem is that we use words differently. Like we all have different vocabulary, and so in order to actually have a conversation, we have to be trying to understand what other people mean with words, that when they use words in an unfamiliar way, it's unavoidable that there will be confusion. So,
Pastor Mo, what do you make of AI Jesus?
AI Jesus. Well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm still intellectually or in my mind wrestling with the idea of the difference agency, even the difference of agency versus agent. Like as a real estate agent, kind of like Jacob was talking about being an insurance agent, I am an agent on behalf of my agency. And so the agency that I possess, small agency, is only the capabilities or ability to advance towards the goals of the agency that I'm a part of. You think of like an FBI agent, an FBI agency. The agent is not the agency. He's just kind of a bot, for lack of a better word, of the overall agency, and is only empowered with what is necessary towards the goals and aims of that agency. Now, the question, or I think the concern, the scary part for a lot of people is you have rogue FBI agents. You have rogue real estate agents. I mean, look at 2007, 2008, even now. You have rogue insurance agents, and I'm still looking into Jacob. And so that's where the danger is. Can you have rogue bots? Rogue bots, not robots.
they are unpredictable black boxes, non-deterministic. That's what makes them scary in my mind. And they are heavily influenced by their training data and the prompts that we give them. Like we tell them essentially their purpose. So it's the training data and the prompts. It's whatever we prompt them with. And then, they're getting better at all of that. Like
my concern really is, we already have some experience with this. If you use, do you remember having to go to MapQuest and then reading your route and then maybe printing it out if you had a printer available? And now, for the most part, I don't even know the names of roads I drive on. I just have an address, I punch it in, and I go. And we might say, well, that's, what big deal is that? We don't really know. And so that's my concern. Those are the unintended consequences of not knowing what it is that you play with unearned wisdom. And so, I don't know. I think it's a fair thing to bring up.
So one point is so this AI generates code. And then if you're not an expert and you're just doing what the AI says, you might actually run code and not understand what's happening. So to everyone's point there, that it's dangerous, for example, to run code that you don't understand. And we do that all the time, but that's probably a good check. Like if or when I start trying to do this, I should read the code. I shouldn't just run it. I should understand what it's doing. And if you don't understand code, you probably shouldn't be running it. I would recommend not to run code you don't understand that's being generated by these things.
Wait until they make a law for you not to be able to run code that you don't understand. And if you do, you may get fined. And if you don't pay the fine, you may be locked up.
How could that ever be enforceable? How could you prove what level of understanding of the code that you have, especially if the code base gets to a considerable size?
I'm wondering how that's relevant, but I do see the relevance in the complex. Like it does get more difficult, and that's
my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is you don't, things will. Enforcements can become arbitrary, and to not pay attention to that is a mistake. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And it is relevant because this is the unintended consequences of playing with stuff that we don't really understand. Something like, I don't know, birth control.
Fraudwith
This all sounds a lot like 2001 Space Odyssey.
Fraudwith says the entire planet runs code they don't understand all day long. And I have to agree with that. Laura, you jumped on. What do you have to say for yourself?
I did. Also, I wouldn't mind showing my face, but I don't know how to turn my camera on.
Well, you're showing the OBS thing, so your camera is set to OBS. So either you have to turn OBS on or you have to change your camera from OBS to whatever your device is.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I could say something about AI. I'll fix my, and you know what, I'm only going to be here for like 15 minutes, so I'll just talk, not worry too much about my camera. So AI already kicked me out of my old job. So I have a little bit to say about that. Is that interesting?
Oh, yes. It's gonna keep happening, and it's gonna happen more and more. So it is interesting.
Yeah. So I used to be a translator. So basically I did every job in 2 stages, right? The first stage was just parsing the sentences, right? You read sentences, which might be really long and complex, and you figure out what they mean. Then you figure out how you got to shift all the words around to make it the right order for an English sentence. Then you think about whether you're picking all the right words to be in the English sentence, et cetera, right? And you kind of do 2 drafts. You do 1 draft where it's just like, okay, I'm just going to figure out literally what this all means. Next draft, I'm going to make it good English. When DeepL got really good, what it was capable of doing was giving you an excellent first draft. So the whole first part of the job was gone, basically, right? And that also means that the world doesn't need nearly as many translators because it used to take a lot of people a lot of time to do all that work. Then suddenly you could do a ton of work with just a few people because the job became checking over DeepL translations rather than actually making translations all on your own, right? Then the other thing I realized was if your job is mostly checking machine translations, you actually get less good at it. I mean, that's what anyone who thinks about it would predict because it makes you lazy. And it's very difficult. So if you have to parse every sentence, you're always on the ball, right? Because you're always thinking hard about everything that's in every sentence. If your job becomes, I got to check someone else's work, and the other entity whose work you're checking is mostly right most of the time, you get really lazy because it becomes hard to pay that level of attention to every sentence. Then what's likely to happen is that you're going to miss errors, which might be little errors or might be pretty important, but just because, you tuned out. And I kind of found that like the job still exists to an extent, but I kind of felt like I couldn't do it well anymore with the balance of what the work was like. So that might be kind of interesting.
Yeah, you can also do a multi-pass. So the thing that has a few errors, you could pass it through again, and it can come out even better. So
you could hand it over to ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, ChatGPT, do you think all these sentences are really well written and make sense in context?"
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there is also a way in which it's not just it takes different types of personalities to do different types of checking, right? So when I was working at a newspaper doing copy editing, it was a very different type of personality who would edit the story as trying to figure out paragraphs and where and the type of personality. And some people would do both, but some people are much more small detail oriented, and some people are larger detail oriented, and so I have to wonder if the personality type shift for the job didn't shift so much for you, Laura.
Yeah, that could be as well. I had an idea a few years ago that let me think now. I thought of 2 different kinds of puzzles. And I felt like being an old-fashioned translator was like doing one kind of puzzle, and being a machine translation copy editor was like doing a different kind of puzzle. The first kind of puzzle would be more like a jigsaw puzzle or like a logic puzzle, where you've got to like rearrange things and put them in a certain order and make shapes or whatever. And the second kind of puzzle that would correspond to proofreading MT would be more like doing find the difference puzzles. The puzzles where you have 2 pictures and it's like, oh, look, there's a toothbrush in this picture, but there's not a toothbrush in the other picture. That's what copy editing MT is more like.
Matthias, your thing, mic was really loud, so I muted you. Feel free to unmute yourself anytime you want to talk.
All right, sorry, first time on here. So, and I'm working at the moment. Hello, everyone. So, I just had to come on here because my thoughts about this is something like Jonathan Peugeot would call that this AI stuff is like the ground for demons to live in. Or when we talked about egregores, that we as people who share content across the social networks act like a neuron in a brain. Today I watched presentations of Microsoft and Google, and I don't know if you saw the clips. They're about 2 to 3 minutes long. They are basically integrating AI into absolutely everything. So you have a personal assistant which you give questions, and it will search through all your documents, all your emails. Will this stuff, make transcripts of everything we do online, everything we do in video chats, and make its mind up? And then if you press auto-generate email or text or whatever, what document you have to create, it will use all the information it gathered about you and everyone else as a basis for that. And what does it what's going on with the bias of its creators? So if there is some intention in that, let's write an email to my colleague, and somehow some social justice stuff will get in there. And I'm lazy, and I just press send. Okay, what will this do to everything? This is what I'm thinking about. Not just the scary part about jobs.
Well, okay, I have to say one thing about jobs, but Father Eric says, I think AI is more like a mirror than an independent being. I have to agree with that. Economically, I mean, there is no such thing as being put out of a job economically, which hurts. That's not a thing. If a job is eliminated economically because it is being done, for example, by AI, that's actually a benefit to the entirety of humanity. This goes back to the broken windows fallacy. There's a lot of things that are counterintuitive about economics that I wish our society would spend a lot more time actually explaining. But if there are jobs that human beings are being paid to do that computers can take over that's not a problem. That's just a boon for everyone. As long as we realize, somebody's being hurt personally, and we as a society need to compensate that person for that individual hurt. There's no problem there because it frees human beings up to do other things. But yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to piggyback that. So yes, the AI is a mirror. All technology, like essentially humans are empowered like cyborgs. So by technology, we are cyborgs right now using technology. So as we add new technology, it gives us new new ways to express ourselves and can even become more powerful, like a nuclear bomb, for example. So I think that's key. Is like it is a mirror, but it also can be something where all of a sudden we can do more harm or we can do more good, to the point Jacob is trying to make with the economy. And then the only thing I would toss in there is that people with a lot of wealth can end up becoming even more powerful, such that and they can direct that AI such that they might they might actually cause suffering. So that we need to make sure that people who are trying to be helpful are also using these tools and technologies to help people and to be of service. So you can amplify good people just like this technology can amplify people who would sacrifice others for their own benefit.
Which brings us back to the question: should Gavin make our AI Jesus?
Not exactly, but kind of. Hey, someone already created an AI Jesus.
Yeah, but a good one, in your words.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. That's the question is, and then what do you prompt it with? So if I try to because I'm looking at these things like tools or slaves, and it's like, well, what command do I give it? And then what's the step-by-step process of, to Mo's point, it's like, I need to be careful that it's not producing something that's going to have unintended consequences, right? For example. So I really liked the advice early on in the stream was, pray at each step. It's like, we have to be very careful when we start outsourcing our thinking over to the robot.
What if the AI devil's advocate is far better than the AI Jesus?
And my concern is that there will not be an AI Jesus, and there will only be the AI, the people who will sacrifice others for their own benefit. That's my concern. So that's why I think it'd be good to try to be good people and try to use technology in a way that's going to be of maximal good. But how? And the question is how.
That's a difficult question.
Right. So, and I think part of that is we can't be too scared of
king.
it. Yes, we want the good king.
You want the good king.
Yeah. Good queen too. Yeah, good king, good queen. Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, I gotta go, and I'm sure somebody else has already mentioned this idea, but if so, I haven't heard it anywhere. Which is what I keep thinking is that we're trying to make an angel, right? It's like we're God and we want to make our own angel or angels.
Yeah, that's what I thought about Pajot talking about demons and egregores. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully an angel. But
there's no way that's going to work out well. All right. Well, see you later.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I think we're trying to make spirits, and once we get enough spirits, we'll get to argue a lot about whether they're angels or demons.
Well, it's a manifestation of the humans. It's an expression of the human spirit. So, that's the scary part, because we know how nasty the human can be, right? We see it in ourselves if we're honest with ourselves. So,
but going back to what Jacob said about these things don't really have will, maybe this is an improper use of the term, but I kind of view it as divinity. These things don't have any divinity. Any divinity perceived in these things is really our own perception of that thing.
What if we imbue our spirit into it, which is what we do with everything we create and all the creations we use?
It'll be more pleasing to yourself.
Pastor Mo, you are the reverend here, the Reverend Moises Pacheco. You are the vicar of Christ. Guide us in your infinite wisdom.
No pressure.
I think that there is a certain amount of as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about all these things, not just 2001 Space Odyssey, where the computer is tasked with something and then the computer realizes the best way towards getting toward that end is not aligned with the one who programmed it for such a thing. So there becomes a separation between the goal and the entity claiming the goal, or something like that. But it also reminds me of like everything that Gavin is saying is, you know, we are giving our spirit into this thing. I mean, this is kind of like goes back to God's creation, breathing the breath of life into humanity. And then it also connects with the Tower of Babel, where, you know, we're trying to build a tower towards God or connect that way. And it seems like whenever technology comes about like this, it does lead to some pretty awful things. But eventually it leads to an understanding of the gravity of the situation. I mean, I think of like the whole Cold War thing. What a terrifying experience that was. I mean, I didn't live through it. You know, I was just a couple years old when that whole thing ended. But how fearful that we have the capability to destroy ourselves very quickly. That's the fear of the Lord right there. I mean, it keeps you from going too far in certain things. And so with this, hopefully, what do we need to maintain that fear? How bad does it get before? And I'm talking about as a collective human race, right? Because I'm sure a lot of us here can talk about it and be like, yeah, that's something we need to approach humbly. But in the global atmosphere, with nuclear weapons, you had Nagasaki, Okinawa, you know, they had some pretty powerful demonstrations that were like, oh, we need to really be careful with this.
Yeah, that's like a whoops moment. It's like, oopsie. It's like, you don't want to do an oopsie with this.
Yeah, you don't want to do an oopsie. That leads to the ending of millions of lives.
Right.
Jonathan Peugeot was talking to, not Chris Williams, I forgot his name, this other guy that's pretty new agey. But they were discussing AI, and Jonathan Peugeot was saying that if you told me that it's some monks in some monastery somewhere making this AI, then I would tell you like maybe it's going to be oriented properly. But like Mo is saying, this has been in the hands of the quote unquote global world, and these aren't monks. These are people that have, you know, money on their mind and other success stories on their mind. So already the foundation of this is not necessarily pure. And I overheard you guys talking again about like with regards to agent and agency. But I was thinking about this recently with my grandfather, and I have a client that is invested in some of this technology. But you know, you'll take an idea like the Chat GPT, and you know, in a few years you have something that on steroids. And I take that and I start feeding it everything my grandfather ever said, every video, every article, and I just feed it to this machine. And then
you have a representation of your grandfather. But is it your grandfather? No.
So Fraud is asking really good questions, and he's the only one on Twitch, so nobody can see him. If the creators of the AI worship Mammon, so will the AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing
sorry,
is,
I was. Go ahead, Gavin.
Oh, no, just on that note, I'll let you get back where you were. Yeah, I can. The large language model could be prompted by someone who is not worshiping Mammon. And then there's a question of, well, how much is that model trained by worshipers of Mammon? So there is a distinction between the model that's been trained by the data and the person who's prompting the model. So there's two different. The one, it's like the conscious and the subconscious. Like, we got to be aware of these things. But Hezi, you were talking about you could take all of the data about your grandfather.
Yeah, I could take. Exactly. Put in a model. I could pair it together with visuals, right? With like a hologram, like you have Michael Jackson dancing on stage, right? And then there you go. You have a basic conversation with your grandfather, and I ask it a question, and it answers me with my grandfather's cadence, and he knows who Hezi is, and he's aware of its history, and you know, at that point, you get to the uncanny valley where you're looking at like, well, is this not grandpa in a certain extent, or maybe it's grandpa enough for grandma who's missing him. Okay, so then the question is, like Nechama was saying, like, we're not gods, we're not creating life. So I'm not even getting into the conversation of like, you know, with biotechnology and are we creating life or not, but definitely once removed. You know what I mean? And then do we even understand the difference at that point? People cry for their dogs, right? Jacob's loving his cats. So for what, you know, and then you're pairing that hologram or that data set together in a body, right? Some sort of bot. Then you're talking about a whole different game, right? So why would my son not have class by Einstein himself? Walking, talking, giving
metaverse character that you can visit anytime after they're dead in the real life.
Well, you guys have seen Man of Steel? The Superman movie. There's where Jor-El, Superman's father, you know,
right, exactly,
puts his own cognition into the ship and can interact with his son.
So granted, like in that scene, right, we don't push it to its limits, right? It could be that there would be some information that it doesn't know, but even Jor-El, as let's say, we'll take that as an extreme example, you know, he is already aware of all Earth knowledge, right, in Krypton, right? So it's for all intents and purposes, even if it's running on a loop, it's a loop that's going to end in 1,000,000 years. So we would never know that loop is ending, and you start getting into questions of like, then is free will a probability? Is free will something that you actually have? And then, you know, that would relate to your relationship with these AIs as far as you're concerned, and as far as what the human mind could fathom, this is the real deal. And all of that could be true before it reaches some, you know, singularity. But again, on that note, I got to run, but I'll be available later today if people are streaming.
I don't even worry about the singularity.
This is Barbara Streisand's Instagram of the 3 dogs she had cloned from her dog who died.
Come again?
She had 3 dogs cloned from the DNA of the dog that died.
Oh, hell, CRISPR.
So say we all.
I like Gavin. If you can make one that loves, you can make a good one.
So do you think
that AI Jesus, we could play it. I think it was actually prompted and trained with an attempt to encourage compassion and kindness, which means it ignored some of my questions, right?
It had interesting answers.
Oh, it definitely. Like, I do wonder how many pastors could do better than AI Jesus. Really.
Well,
I
hate to put any quality on those answers.
Just
Parts
say
of it sounded nice, but there's also a hollowness to it.
Like, I could see Mo being able to receiving a difficult question, and just saying, "Well, let's see what AI Jesus says," and then you could like then say,
"I'll see what AI Jesus says," and I'll be like, "Okay, how can I make it better?"
Yeah, well, you can ask Jesus and write it down, and then go to AI Jesus and say,
Ask Jeeves came a long way, didn't he?
It's just the amount of
do you think
content that can be
ChatGPT
digested.
can already put together DNA sequences?
I don't know.
It can make a sequence. Who knows what will come out the other side once it grows?
I think anything that's mechanistic, it should be able to do.
Yeah, thank. I was just praying for women influence, but yeah, please stop this apocalyptic vision that these guys are painting.
I came back to yell at you guys, maybe against my better judgment. I have an emotional response to this, which is very interesting. Like, I'm so disgusted by the idea of trying to keep a person I love alive past their date that they have crossed over to wherever they go next. Like, it's so viscerally disgusting to me. I can't find a better word for that. It seems to go against every natural instinct and inclination that I have to even consider the idea. It just seems like so
selfish.
Yeah, I don't know. And I just find it frustrating because I keep hearing this, and I'm just very frustrated that I don't find that other people are sharing this sentiment, I suppose, as I am.
Oh, we are disgusted.
Yes.
I know I am.
Well,
There
Very
was a
much
movie.
disgusting.
This is an
Very much.
actual movie that they did this, where they took this woman was married to a man. They had a daughter. They were young and married. He died in a car accident. A friend of hers got her in contact with the robotics company. They made the robot, and like the dude sat up in the attic for like ever because he was just so creepy to her. And it was like, then we have to like consider, well, like how bad is that for the robot or for the AI? Is it unethical there
There's the whole
too?
Frankenstein monster. I mean, that story's there. You see it in the Harry Potter with the Resurrection Stone, and the guy bringing his, one of the the Peveril brothers brings his fiance back, and it's so unhappy that he ends up killing himself because it never works out well.
I answered this the way I answered Grimgriz when he says, why would you want to reincarnate anyone? Is that, well, and it might be to Nakama why she feels disgusted. Is like, she probably knows that those people would not want to be recreated as some type of, avatar thing. And she probably doesn't want to be recreated as such. But I think the question would be like, what does each person want? So, it's kind of like organ donors. Do you want your organs donated or not? Right. And the question is like, are you going to tell everyone they shouldn't be organ donors, or do we just respect each person's decision on whether they would want to be represented, right, as some type of a, avatar?
Well,
I think you can.
I'm creating
make the
these
choice.
things on YouTube. We're on YouTube, and the representation is on YouTube, and who knows how long, right?
So there are many forms of representation. So if you have a loved one that's passed away, do you keep photos of them? Do you have a video of them? Do you have a diary that they've written that you can read through? And maybe you've got something you're struggling with and you're searching through the diary and you find some sort of answer from there. But none of these things have a particular agency. Whereas when you get to one of these language models, I can see people feeling a sense of revulsion towards that. And Chad earlier was referring to Black Mirror episode 4, Be Right Back, where that happens, and she kind of warms up to him, but then she realizes it's not really him, and you get to this question of continuity of identity, and it's kind of a strange question of when you go to sleep and you wake up again, you're still you, but if you've had a really bad head injury and you're suffering from really severe amnesia, your identity's really struggling, and you've really lost a sense of who you are. And in certain spiritual traditions, you have the Dalai Lama, like in the Tibetan Buddhism, and they consider that there is a continuity of identity, that some aspects of this egregore of Tibetan Buddhism is passing down through each Lama as it continues on. And so
that's not just Tibetan Buddhism. I mean, when Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do they say you are?" and they say Elijah or John the Baptist.
Exactly.
And that's not that those people didn't know that John the Baptist had been killed. And when I pulled this picture up, I don't know that anybody other than Barbara Streisand doesn't think that that's absolutely grotesque.
I would withhold judgment.
It did not bother me.
Another example of something like that, similar, is it's become common amongst, should I say, maybe less than mature Puerto Ricans to stuff bodies for their funerals. So you can actually Google this, Puerto Rican stuffed body, and you'll see a gangbanger that was killed. And at his funeral, he was posed in his clothes with a cigarette in his hand. And it's like the creepiest thing ever. But this is somebody's family did this for the funeral in order to spend one more day with this guy hanging out having a cigarette or something like that. So it's like, yeah, it is grotesque and amongst a lot of people. And I think that's why you have the Frankenstein story written, and many of these stories is because there are some people who will endure the grotesque to be able to experience or to try not let go, if that makes sense.
The reason
This is from the Daily Mail for our UK audience. Going out with a bang, corpses are posed with glasses of champagne, video games, and even on a motorcycle as popularity of extreme embalming rises.
All of this in a culture where in Canada we have maids, and we're talking about potential uploading your consciousness into an AI, and then we have some other weird stuff that's actually happening now. Like all of my grandparents that passed away, none of them wanted a funeral, and that I thought was very selfish. And I just think that's very strange.
We are doing it now. You are uploading your conscious right now, even maybe accidentally, but you're doing it.
Yes, I think about that a lot. I think about what are we doing? We don't know what we're doing.
But
we're
it's a
more
reduction.
uploading aspects of self, not consciousness.
It's materialism. When you reduce everything you are to the material world, then the question becomes, why not do something like this? Why not try to preserve
like
the
my spirit
material?
my spirit is being recorded right now. The
No,
spirit
it's
of
not.
Gavin.
No, it's not.
Okay,
Aspect
so what are we
of
doing when we read about Jesus? Like, what are we doing when we have team spirit? There's like there are these forces.
A spirit
right?
moves you, and there are things about what we record about you that can, in fact, animate people in the future, but that's not the completeness of you. And I think this is part of the internet.
And that's what
the
spirit is
problem of
not the
internet.
completeness. So the spirit is not complete. It is incomplete always.
Correct. Okay. Yes. But when we talk to somebody over the internet, that's not actually interacting with them themselves.
You never actually interact with a person. Like, you don't know exactly what's in my mind. I'm just attempting to express my spirit. And
how you interact with your wife in your home is very different, is qualitatively different than the interactions we have over the internet.
And
that's an interesting point, like, because it makes me beg the question, because it seems like, and Gavin, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like what you're saying is that it is qualitatively the same, but it's not quantitatively the same. So the degree at which you interact with your wife is more because you're not just encountering the spirit, but you're encountering the embodied aspect.
She can smell me and she can hold my hand.
It's a lot more
brush my teeth,
of her, but it's still not all of her, because there's still parts of her that are hidden that you still have to discover, which there's a kind of beauty in that.
Right.
And so I'm not saying, Jacob, that you're wrong, but I'm saying it's interesting to think about, though.
He's not saying you're wrong, but he's not saying you're right.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't really know, but it's interesting.
I think the difference is not just quantitative. I think it's qualitative.
I think
I agree with Jacob here.
Wouldn't you say that it's another layer of garments of skin we are wearing in this? And it's just this layer that is visible over this medium of light, let's say.
I like that. Another
Good
garment.
analogy.
So, I mean, that goes to what Gavin was saying about cyborgs and wearing.
Well, I can talk to some people on the internet and they can understand me better than, for example, my child, right? And then there's plenty of people I can talk to that don't understand me at all, right? And so, it's the spirit of the thing. Like, I understand myself better than everyone else, but some people can understand me better than others. And even remotely, across time, even there's people in the future who will understand me better than, the audience here today. Right.
That's sort of actually what I was thinking, because I noticed you said one aspect where Jacob shook his head, and I think in my mind I was shaking my head at the same thing. When you said I know myself better than anybody else, that's maybe I should frame that in a question. Is that not a debatable claim? That there may be people that know you better, and Jacob, this is actually why I'm questioning whether it's qualitative versus quantitative, because we're talking about degrees of knowledge. And so I don't know necessarily that it's a different kind of knowledge, although I could be wrong. I mean, if you want to explain that.
Well, okay, so
Can I chime in for 1 second? There is a big example that was out 10 years ago claiming that Google already knows if a woman is pregnant before she already knows. So I think as the scary part of this whole topic could be that within a year, Google, or maybe eventually right now, we don't know. It depends how much exposed you are to the medium, I guess. But maybe this whole AI egregore stuff, however you may call it, already knows you better somehow than you know yourself.
So, I mean, it does come down to perspective. And there is a certain perspective I have from within my skin that is qualitatively different from how people perceive me from outside my skin. And in some ways, I think that will definitely be more accurate because we have a very hard time seeing ourselves as we are. So that's already a real problem there. And I think that excuse me.
This is why I have a sponsor, because in many ways he does understand me and know me a lot better than I know myself. He attempts to take an objective position. I'm not saying he's going to achieve that, but that's the attempt. And so he helps me to be a mirror that I can't see, because I'm willing to have him see more of me than I can see. And I trust it.
I think this also goes into the topic of the self, like Vervaeke is trying to lay out, that there is no monadic self. The self is somehow the result of this dialogical interaction with everyone in our community.
Now, that's, I would say, very different from what I'm saying regarding how we perceive people through the internet. Because through the internet, we're stripping so many layers of observation in how a person, look, what you're seeing from this camera is one part of my apartment. When Andrew came over to my place on Friday, he saw the entirety of my apartment, and it looks very different. And when you're sitting next to a person, there is a qualitative difference to being in a room with someone to being on a Zoom with someone. And I think that is not, if you're not realizing that, you haven't spent enough time in a room with someone.
Some people are children in the same room, right? There are children. We all grow up. We have maturity levels. There's certain amounts of things we can understand and perceive. So I'm just saying, I have a 2-year-old. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So, right? Do they know me better than you do, Jacob? Right? So,
but
that's not the point, Gavin. Different. I think if you were interacting, Gavin, with your son through the internet, 2,000 miles away from him, versus him being in the same room as you, that's
right.
what I'm hearing, Jacob.
I get that point, but I wasn't making any claim like that.
So I don't think there's actually any point of disagreement here. I think Gavin is in complete agreement with Jacob that being over a video camera is different than being in person. That's just blatantly obvious. I don't actually see that there's a point of disagreement here.
Yeah, well, it's kind of more like I'm thinking what is the nature of the difference is kind of something I'm wrestling with. And you're right, it's probably not the biggest deal in the world. It's not like we're worth having a huge argument.
No, I think it's important. The difference is important. I don't think Jacob and Gavin were saying different things, but I think Jacob was pointing to something that
I'm trying to point at something like love, like Nate was saying. He had quoted, I think Barfield, that God is a conversation, and it's like, and it was just your ability to understand me is based on your ability to listen or show me love, right? And I'm talking to people 100 years from now potentially, right? So we all have different capacity to actually listen. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about being understood.
Jacob, right? Would you agree that you are at least in some parts, leaving spirit, consciousness, whatever word you want to use, on the
I'm
internet.
very deliberately. I mean, when I started my channel, my YouTube channel, I did not imagine that anybody would ever listen to me live. I imagined that maybe one person in 100 years would decide that they want to have a letter by letter walkthrough of biblical Hebrew. And the fact that that video I made, I mean, the fact it has thousands of watch hours, that it has tens of thousands of clicks, is absolutely amazing to me. I would have bet that it would have less than 100 clicks on it in 1,000 years. I'm
And
not even
would you
joking.
say those 1,000 people that watched your video, were they impacted by the spirit of Jacob?
In
So
some
that's
way, yeah,
easy.
definitely. And it's funny, like the first time I got recognized, somebody actually came up to me and he's like, "You're Jacob." I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "From the YouTube channel." I'm like, "What?"
Parasocial relationship.
But it is different. Come on, you can't say that it's not different.
It is
Holding
different.
someone's hand, sitting next to them, actually hugging them.
Not just different, it's better, I would say.
Well,
And
and
that-
the only reason I investigate like the type of difference, because I know obviously it's different, but the type of difference is like for people who are limited in a certain way, if that makes sense. And when you're limited, it's unfortunate, but what kind of things avail to you? Like if you're blind, okay, I can never experience, like if I went blind, I could never experience looking at my wife again. Okay, well, what am I losing there? And is there a way to compensate for that in an embodied way?
Yeah.
If I
You can hop
lose,
into the simulation with her.
yeah, I mean, and so you got to wrestle with these questions. At what point are you just not dealing with the loss? And at what point are you just okay to be accommodated? Because like even the Zoom thing, like us having the conversation, this is so cool because there would be no other possibility of us all having this conversation at the same time.
Exactly.
However, I want to be careful that I don't become addicted to this kind of conversation, as cool as it is. I'm not going to reject it on the one hand, but at the same time, I can't embrace it as the best. So in figuring out how much do I allow this into my life, I feel like I have to understand, or I have to at least think about what the differences are and the qualitative versus the quantitative and all that stuff.
This is why I take my road trips. This is why I drove many, many hours to go have tea over at Anami's house.
I remember that Nafama was sharing a story about, her family at one point in time kind of being separate and at another point in time having coming together. And that's kind of the thing where, that one point in time, there was a different relationship compared to another point in time in which it was a better relationship. And that's kind of my point, is that sometimes you can even be in the same room with people and it still isn't as good as it could be, right? Like, and then I would say, and I would question, can you have a relationship with, some people, not the same individual, but some people in a virtual space, and have a better relationship than you would with like the, other people in the actual like
Better in what way?
Oh,
Space.
You can easily
confrontation. Yeah,
you can easily come up with an edge case. So, for example, there's a couple who's just broken up, but they're still in the same house together. Their presence and attention and focus on each other isn't going to be of the same quality as a couple who've been together for years. They've had to be separated for a year, but they're about to meet up and they're having one last Zoom call before they're going to come and meet together, and they're full of excitement. And so one situation they're physically together, but again, this isn't a central case, this is an edge case, just to demonstrate that there are some times where the physical presence isn't as good as a video representation. But in general, I mean, we would all rather be, I assume, be sat in the same room, present, having a good chat about things. But geographically we're all limited. We can't just teleport around, and so we're making the best of what we've got. And so whether there's a best way of doing things, given all the various contexts, this probably is the best for us all to be talking, even though ideally we might want to be face to face. That isn't a possibility, and so we're making the most of it.
Has
I
anybody
have another
noticed
thought.
that?
I have. I'm sorry, Chad.
I just was wondering, has anybody noticed their conversations in person suffering in ways that they haven't before? Because, I would say Jacob and Gavin and I have spent probably more time doing this stuff, at least publicly. And I would say for me, I find that my social conversations in person are more difficult because I'm kind of in a little bit of a funnel here, and I'm always talking about kind of the same stuff. And like when I get into person, I'm like, I don't know what the hell to talk about. And I'm just wondering if you guys are dealing with that at all.
That's a good question.
I haven't, in terms of the online stuff. It does affect me a lot if I'm with written forums, because it's a much slower way of communication. And so I find myself in my head a lot more when reacting to like an email, like CRC voices. I get really annoyed on CRC voices, and then I'll be annoyed for like an hour. And it's like my wife or my kids are trying to talk to me. I'm trying to develop, do I want to respond to this nonsense or whatever? And that ends up affecting me more. On here, it hasn't, or anytime I've been online with people, it hasn't. Mainly because I've become such a talkative person that I enjoy. It's like, ooh, there's things I could talk about here. Hey, and I can go, tell somebody else about it. So, but granted, I'm probably not as active as some of you guys might have been.
I think switching from text to much more voice and video has really changed things for me for the better. I think I have noticed so many things about video conversation that is just so important, not least of which is silence. There's no silence in text communication. There's no pause of, oh, I'm thinking about what you said, or wow, that was so dumb, I don't even know what to say.
Is it that there's no silence, or is it that there's all silence? I mean, because there's no sound at all, I kind of conceptually, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Okay, so one thing that I've noticed is in text, especially on Twitter, someone can say something so incredibly stupid that I refuse to actually engage. And they will take that as a response of, oh, well, obviously you have no response, as if they said something profound. And that happens a lot on Twitter. And when you're in a room with a bunch of people and one person says something so embarrassingly dumb that everyone kind of goes quiet and is like, there's feedback there. Whereas on Twitter, people are doing that 24/7 and taking it as a positive response to what they said. That's why you have Twitter with so many hot takes.
So the ability to read the room and having a shared context of what that means is so different over text. It's so alien.
I think it's because a lot of the communication also happens in the receiver, right? So we all have these little avatars of ours, and all the information that's missing through the medium is what our mind extends. So it kind of creates it. And the little information on Twitter is just so little that there is lots of extension going on and interpretation going on. Besides, if we have more, like now you can see my facial expression, you kind of see the room here that I'm working. You hear my voice, much more how much of a guy I am. So this is all the stuff you don't have to interpret and extend out.
And an aspect of that I feel like Nechama brought up in an old conversation is how we respond to certain things in terms of actually like fear. Like on a written Twitter especially, I'm not afraid of what anybody's going to do or say. Here, where I can see your faces, there's a little bit of fear of somebody raising their voice. I mean, I don't anticipate that happening with most of you guys, but fear of maybe somebody saying...
How dare you?
I'm terrified of Jacob. But there is that aspect. We don't want to experience the awkwardness of the raising of the voice.
So I could interrupt you right now.
Expression.
I could interrupt you.
Embodied, that escalates even more because...
If it was text, what would I do? You know?
Yeah, exactly. But if we're in person, well, then you're even more afraid because now there might be some physical ramifications. And it may not be seen with us because so far our conversation is very friendly.
Right.
But I get a lot of, people in text or in emails or phone calls that are aggressive towards me. That wouldn't be like that if we were in person. I remember when I was doing property management, I had an owner that hired me over the phone, and he was really chewing me out over the phone. We got to the property, and he started to talk to me the same way. And then I just got really close to him and said, "You need to be careful how you talk to me." And he started being really apologetic.
I want to connect that with what Chad asked. Like Chad asked.
Yeah. Well, what this does is, I think that's a very valuable attribute to lose, the masculine threat. And online is a lot of the worst aspects of femininity, especially when people who haven't embodied femininity are using it and they don't even know it and they think they're being masculine. I fall into this category often. I often get upset with Jacob and I act like a little bitch. And, that's the worst aspects of femininity, and then now I'm doing this over and over and over, and now watch me go out and be a bitch at home.
Yeah, well,
If you haven't watched the discussion between Jordan Peterson and Camille Paglia, it may be one of the most important and best videos on the internet.
So when Chad had asked the question earlier that kind of let us hear was, what is the impact in our daily lives and those personal interactions, and what it's like the cost, for example, of us doing this thing in the virtual space, and it's kind of like the story of going to work and like getting mistreated at work and then bringing that back home. And then, for example, bringing that energy back home and mistreating your wife or children. That kind of thing can happen. It's similar to what Mo is pointing out. Obviously you can come with an energy that was from another place with different people and then direct it and express it. If you're not having self-control and attempting to, watch that energy, you can end up hurting people, and expressing an energy and expressing a spirit that there's no reason for it except that you're going through a struggle that they don't even know that you were going through, right? So that's the challenge with these virtual spaces. In my experiences, trying to just bring the right spirit into every relationship and not just allow the spirit of the previous relationship to, cause me to mistreat somebody.
So the more embodied your representation is and the way that you're engaging, the more you can regulate aggression and aggressive spirits. Like Mo said, your boss in person starts shouting in your face and you say, "Hey, wait a second. Watch how you're talking to me," compared to on Twitter, if it's all aggression all day, all the time, everywhere, there's no regulation for that. There's no, like, in terms of a feedback loop, it's all amplification. There's nothing dialing down. There's no negative feedback into it.
I don't know if this is a little bit off track, but I think it's still on the same. But as you were speaking more, I was reminded of, I don't know where, but in one of Paul's letter, where he was talking about how they perceive him to be more aggressive in writing and more passive in person. And yeah, but he was using that as a good thing, that I can be more stern in my words, but I don't have to be stern in person.
Mm.
In my word, I try to be short.
Sternness in person is not only does it cause that fear, but there's also risk involved. Like, for example, my church is on this corner where there's a big drug market, and a lot of violence happens. Just Friday night, there was a big gunfight. Somebody was killed on my street. And I've been wrestling with, okay, well, what can I do as a pastor, as a community leader here? And one of the ideas that came to my head, and I'm still wrestling with this, is setting up a table and chairs and a tent with a big sign that says just chatting. I've been involved with all these virtual just chattings. What if I did an embodied just chatting? However, what I'm wrestling with is that I'm putting myself embodied in the middle of a drug war zone with people that know what I'm about and know that it's against their vested interests.
So
and the risk of embodied violence is a real risk. And yeah, they might be a little bit afraid too, but they're not unwilling to engage.
How much do you know about the Black Hebrew Israelites? Do you have them in your community?
We don't have them in our community, but I'm loosely familiar with them.
Okay, so one of the things, I had Vocab Malone, who's an evangelist to them, on my channel. And one of the things that he's pointed out is the Black Hebrew Israelites gain cachet because they are on the same street corners in the middle of very, not the best neighborhoods in the world, every single week, talking to everyone, not backing down. They are actually there standing on those street corners. And because of that, they have gained a sort of status that is way disproportionate to their ideas.
Skin in the game. They're actually willing to kind of be out there and take the risks, and that kind of shows.
Mo, was that right along 90-94? Was
No,
there like because we drove
90.
We drew 90. Yeah, we drove through Friday night to go to Indiana, and there was like at least seven cruisers up there with their blues on, right along Interstate 90.
Yeah.
Was that you?
No, I think that was there were two, or I'm sorry, there were three big incidents Friday night. One in Austin, one over by there, and this one was just right actually in front of my house. It was three guys, two guys with handguns, one with an automatic weapon, and they were targeted after one guy, and they got him. But it was right. I had just laid down in bed to go to sleep, and it started. But it's one of those things where, I've been advocating to the police department and to the local politicians. It's a pretty open and obvious drug market there. And hey, shut this down. Somebody's going to get killed, and people have been killed, but nothing's really been done about it. Of course, since Friday night, there has been a larger police presence there. But how long will that stay there? Who knows? But it's one of those things. What is my responsibility as not just a community member, because I know I have a responsibility there, but as a religious leader in said community? And so I've been wrestling with that. I think about the just chatting thing. I am leaning towards doing it, but it's with this understanding that with it comes a level of risk. I mean, just if these guys start something, like they try to jump me and I fight back and I win, but they get it on camera. How does that look for a guy with my complexion beating up some drug dealers on the street, and that goes viral, it's
wear a collar, Mo, wear a collar.
Maybe
I'm not even
that's a good
joking.
idea.
I am not even joking. Wear a collar.
But then how does that look? A guy with a collar beating down some guy, potentially cursing.
No. So frankly, I think if you're wearing a collar, and that's, have you read that book by the guy from Industries, Homeboy Industries?
I have not.
It was a required reading for one of my classes. And I mean, I think he made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I still think he makes a huge number of mistakes because he's way too woke and way too popular with Hollywood. But there's something to be said about wearing a collar. I've been trying to get PBK to wear a collar more. I actually bought him some collared shirts. And I love the fact Father Eric wears a collar everywhere. It shows something.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
In a lot of ways, it's like wearing a red cross on a battlefield.
Yeah.
Do you own a collar?
I don't. I have thought about. I mean, when I was initially on the process of getting ordained, I was considering becoming an Anglican priest, in which that would have been a higher priority. So I'm not opposed to it, but
CW, you need to buy Mo a collar. I've decided you're going to need to buy Mo a collar
for my live just chatting sessions.
Yes.
Imagine if that's something that like became a thing.
Well, you should in fact have it be who's that guy Steven Crowder. With his change my mind
yeah
things, right? So yeah, man on the street videos, take a camera with you and yeah, do it.
We'll see.
You have a Starfleet uniform? You could wear your Starfleet uniform.
You know, I could wear a Naruto costume, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the young guys would love it.
You should.
Full cassock. Full cassock. Monk's robes? Come on.
I don't know if that's just asking to get beat up.
The Naruto costume?
No. You give someone the nine-tail fox will help you. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm like, no, these guys, these young even the guys in the drug community, they love Naruto. They may not advertise it on the corner, but they're all huge fans.
Anime, yeah. Naruto.
This might be a bit of a tangent. If you guys are up for it, talking again about the AI Jesus concept. Something that I would struggle with the AI Jesus is people have somewhat of a shared concept of who Jesus is and was. And although there are different translations of the Bible, again, there is some kind of continuity of identity of what the Bible is. And whether it was the apostles and the gospels, whether it's the Council of Nicaea, there's some continuity of identity along the way. And so I'm sure there are various people coming up with various large language models simulating Jesus. And so you kind of end up with various different versions of them all competing. And I mentioned to Teo a few hours ago about, I don't see them ever doing it, but something like the Catholic Church or some Christian group with, I don't know if authority is the right word, but someone was saying earlier about if a group of monks were the ones creating a large language model, that there is a different feeling of the identity of this thing. It's being bestowed with a different spirit, or again, I don't know if I tend to think of things as egregores. And even in a previous conversation with Teo, we were talking about when Moses goes up the mountain and sees the burning bush, and there's this moment where he re-picks up the continuity of an old tradition. And again, he develops this sense of a continuity coming down the line. And so what's the difference between just anyone's interpretation of Jesus's word and the Bible, and here's a large language model, versus, oh, this one's got some real, power's not the right word, but this one's got some real attraction and influence and insight.
I haven't played too much with ChatGPT, but one of the first things I did was I asked, what about social justice? And it responded, social justice is an important I said, what about Jesus? It responded, as an AI, I have no opinions about religious
Massively. The bias in there already that's been put in. You ask it to give a list of reasons why veganism is healthy for you. Great. Oh, why is it unhealthy? Oh, I can't do that. That's harmful information. You go and ask it about a meat-eating diet. Oh, well, yeah, it's very peculiar, the biases that have been
Is
put
that
in there.
not what Gavin was mentioning earlier about the subconscious of the AI? It's the beta programmers have influence on the subconscious of what happens, and then the prompts.
Well, there's the unconscious biases, which are a whole problem.
From the training data.
Then there's the actual conscious biases, which are also a huge problem.
Yeah, you can apply
Then
filtering
there are
when you train your
the
model.
biases that come from the always ongoing training. So these models, they aren't deterministic, right? So there's no starting point. The initial biases, the unconscious biases, the conscious biases, but then now suddenly 1 billion people are feeding it with their spirits. Let's call it that way. I don't know how to tell you.
So we'll have a new holy war. We'll have a new holy war where I'm going to try and be God before you be God.
Exactly, Chad. Exactly.
Yes.
And
perfectly.
My response to Anthony was, well, there'll definitely be another reformation. The Catholic Church can't withstand a disembodied LLM being the authoritative figure when they can't even figure out what to do with the Pope right now. So it's, yeah.
There's no way that the Catholic Church would actually implement their own large language model and bring that in. But unfortunately, if you don't do that, it's like not embracing the printing press, and all of a sudden every other tradition and religious group and cult are printing massive amounts of information and sharing and spreading it. It would be like the internet comes along. Oh, we're not sharing on the internet. You would have to, it's like almost like the Amish approach. The only real way our movement is spreading is through our children and our society reproducing in that sense. I suspect.
I would be very, very surprised if the Catholic Church doesn't eventually end up with a chatbot. How a lot of people are going to end up with advanced chatbots, because look, ChatGPT seems like a very important and capable tool that I think will be very useful. The thing is, I mean, and again, I want to talk to Joseph about this because he is getting his PhD in robotics, and he does, this is the stuff he knows best. I want to know if my impression that people are blowing this way out of proportion, and it's not just me who's saying this. I mean, I've heard Peter Thiel and Eric Weinstein, who are funding these projects, say similar things about how, and we've been hearing for years and years and years about self-driving cars. They're still not here, right? And how long has it been? I mean, as a child, I certainly thought we would have self-driving cars by now. We don't.
My final year project was on self-driving cars in 2017.
And
he didn't get there. I'll spoil it for you. He hasn't invented them.
Consolidating the ECUs was a bigger challenge than first thoughts. So yeah, we're still quite a bit off. I think we're comfortable at level 3 automation. Level 5 is still quite a bit.
I think the question is what it does to the human mind, because when you start, so I'm a jeweler, and in the jewelry industry, we all already have a big discussion about using the DALL-E and what's its name? I don't, all the models, for image generation, for design processes. And the current conclusion is actually it's not a decision you can even make. You have to use it to stay in competition in a few years or even at the end of the year. So you kind of have your way paved out. You are now locked into this path. And I find myself always, you have to find these prompts. The same with ChatGPT. It feels like interacting with an oracle. And I don't know what it does to my mind. I don't, it's always like asking a higher power, what should I do? It's asking, give me the answer. It's like a form of praying somehow. It's super, super strange if you start interacting with it to get results, for me at least.
In some ways, I think this ties back to what Chad was saying earlier about the difference between MapQuest and using Google to essentially drive you wherever purely through instruction by Google. If I'm in a different state, I don't really feel obligated to learn all the streets, actually navigate the landscape that I'm driving in. I just want to get from A to B. So I think it's a good use of using Google Maps to navigate. But if I'm in my home city, I do recognize that if I'm just following Google, I'm not paying attention to the roads. I'm not paying attention to the streets.
Well, I used to know phone numbers. I used to have my friends' phone numbers memorized.
Yep.
I still know those old phone numbers.
But I don't know new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can still remember my best friend's phone number from when I was 14.
Yeah, but this goes against your argument from earlier, Jacob, because you said that whatever the technology brings us, that takes away something we humans had to struggle through, which is a hard task. And now it makes it easier for us because we can just use the technology. We also lose something.
He was talking about
I
economics.
would say,
No, I was
but
talking
it's the same thing.
economically.
It's very similar, though, Jacob. It's very similar.
Well, okay, so let me. This economic point is really important because there are people who fear, for example, that if we get Yang, what's his first name? The guy who ran for president,
Andrew Yang.
Yang made a huge deal about, okay, if we get self-driving cars, there are about 3 million people who are drivers right now, and let's say it only gets rid of half of those jobs, right? That's 1 million people who are unemployed. Economically, that's absolute nonsense. That economically, and I'm only talking economically. Now, I'm not saying that those individual people who are drivers are not going to be out of work, but economically, the system itself should be, not that I'm saying it will, but should be willing to pay those people some form of recompense in order to free them up in that way to do other things. And this is part of the problem we have with economic progress. And economic progress is good. Economic progress is actually good.
There's always trade-offs.
No. Yes, there are always trade-offs, but some things are preferable states to others.
Well,
we live in a much better world than we did 100 years ago.
One second. So when you say economically it's better, the word economics in this specific context. So I might be quite naive, but my understanding, economics, currency, allocation of resources, it's just very loose, very simple. Obviously, it's way more complicated than that. These people are no longer doing this job. So I can see what you're saying, that the system's now more efficient. We've now got more people that we can allocate to do other things. It seems like we're reducing inefficiency, and that should be a good thing. But on the other hand, in terms of allocation of resources, if your main job is that you're driving, it's quite likely from my experience that you haven't got the training or qualifications to move into other areas of work. And so if you've been displaced from that work and the current system isn't allocating you resources to compensate, because I don't think I've ever seen people receive economic compensation because their jobs have been automated. you kind of just go, all right, well, you have to go and retrain yourself. That to me would look like, oh, it's a problem. All of a sudden, Amazon versus Apple, Google, there's just these giant centralized things controlling, and all the resources are centralizing into these monopolies, and the people down at the bottom
Okay.
are struggling.
So
But does that make sense? I might be being
hear
naive.
you. No. I hear you. What you are expressing is a common sentiment. The problem is that common sentiment is based on certain ideological, and I have to say the London School of Economics, unfortunately, is a big proponent of these simply false sentiments that we need to actually move beyond. So Thomas Sowell wrote a book, Basic Economics. I highly recommend it. It's available completely free on YouTube. The audiobook, highly recommend it. And that's not to say I 100% agree with everything Thomas Sowell says, but there are economic realities. So, for example, I was driving up to San Francisco, right? Now, imagine if I was trying to go from Los Angeles to San Francisco 100 years ago.
Man, awful.
I am sitting in a car, right, that has a bed in the back, pretty much literally a bed in the back, right, that has air conditioning and a heater, has music, all the music, like, imagine if I were the wealthiest king in the world 100 years ago.
You wouldn't have all of that. Oh, yeah. So I can see the benefits of modern technology.
And I wanted to have all the things that I had during that 8-hour drive. Imagine what I would pay for it to be only an 8-hour drive.
So I think we can all see the benefits of the modern technology.
Can we? Too many people, and ortho bros will do this. Will say, "Oh no, we were better off 100 years ago." If you haven't heard this, you haven't been.
I would say what the focus of the technology is, because let's say what you are telling us about is the focus of the car. It's actually about the meaning of the car, because the meaning of the car for you is enabling you in your competence to drive a long distance comfortably, and it's giving you freedom.
Right.
Okay. So having a car economy like we have now, where everyone makes a driver's license and has therefore more competence, yeah, that frees everyone. That's a big factor for the freedom. If I lose my car and I can't afford another car, or the government says you can't drive a car anymore because the self-driven cars, they are a lot safer, and you human, you are much more prone to making accidents, that will reduce my freedom. And when we talk about economics, for me, I'm a craftsman. So for me, economics is a lot about, is only about what I am doing for other people. Economics is about what people are doing with each other. We're using the technology as a layer between that raises our competence. But for me, this AI stuff introduces something that's kind of rent-seeking in every single interaction I have with it, because it's not only providing me with something, it's always taking something, extracting something out of the interaction for itself.
That's not rent-seeking. Okay, that's not rent-seeking. Rent-seeking is when you don't provide. Rent-seeking is when you take a cut of a transaction without providing any value.
Okay, it provides value, but it's also taking a cut.
You want everything that provides value to take a cut.
So
how much of a cut is an important question, though.
Like,
is it making me more competent?
Even if it's taking 99% of the cut, you because it's generating more than the cut it's taking. That's the difference between rent seeking and providing value.
So, I'm with Jacob here. I think that Matthias's point is to point out that I think legitimately that, you know, you spend all this time learning a skill, you get displaced. Now, how you can't recover all that time, and it's hard to recover that time and like try to learn a new skill. And
Well,
it's not
that-
bad to Jacob's point. Look,
Governments,
I'm not
governments do retrain people. I mean, that to
but
Antony's point, governments do spend money to retrain people.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
want to point out though that, like, in my mind, is we could ask the AI to help us make sure we have food, water, shelter, clothing as efficiently as possible and reliably as possible, such that when we get displaced, we have this safety net. Like, that's the kind of thing that would be nice to have, is that the AI make sure that we're producing the food, water, shelter, clothing that would make sure that we don't have to fear losing our job and
But
fear.
who is producing it? It's the farmers. It's the people.
Well, and so we can all
Well,
become,
it
we can
doesn't
all become
have to be.
farmers. For
So
example.
this is the thing. This is the thing. Okay, if there were no human farmers, if only machines were producing all our food, is that a bad thing?
No.
It
Would
depends.
it make us more or less free?
More
I don't see that it actually
Oh.
that it itself changes the balance of rights. Which government?
it's not-
When
When he says free, I hear time. Like, how much freedom do you have to do with your time? I'm not talking about governments and rights, but that's how I answered. Does it make you more free? It's like, well, you don't
But
have to go.
it's a
grow
very
your
narrow
food.
definition of freedom. So is it the same freedom that you feel when you are able to drive a car wherever you want, wherever you want?
It can be, Matthias. See, this is the thing. You're locking two things in with each other that simply do not need to be related. There is no relation.
I'm not looking. I'm
It's
just.
relevant. It is relevant.
I'm just trying to ask questions by stating
Yeah,
something.
Matthias, you're making relevant.
Yes.
I think you are making relevant points, and I think Jacob's making relevant points. I think
Yes.
it's relevant.
I think so too.
If
Yeah.
all food production was done under the umbrella of big agro corporation, that I have concerns there that is a point of control for the food supply of a nation.
Yeah, an
And
AI would
that
not
can be
recommend
corrupted,
that. A good AI
but-
would not recommend that.
You take that same model, decentralize it throughout the country to where there's an abundance of food all over, not controlled by centralized authority. That kind of
Okay.
paints a beautiful picture for me.
Right.
Like
And-
eating.
Yeah, but then there's Brongo, and that's what plants crave.
It has electrolytes.
Idiocracy. Yeah.
I have no idea what Chad just
Yeah,
said.
I don't know what Chad said.
So there's a film
That's
called
a
Idiocracy.
Movie reference.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. 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 So I have to say, part of this is economic history, and I blame honestly the London School of Economics for this more than anything.
What is that? I don't know what that is.
It's what people actually think Klaus Schwab has been doing with taking over the world secretly, but it's actually been doing that for hundreds of years. London School of Economics, look it up. Taya knows who I'm talking about. But so, okay, what has happened with mechanization of farming is now we have small individual farmers. We have individual families. There's this YouTube channel I watch way too much called Sheepishly Me. And this woman, Sandy Brock, and her husband run a farm. And it's basically just the two of them running a farm where she produces something on the order of like 300 sheep every year for, actually much more than 300 sheep a year. But at least 300 sheep a year, right? This is two people producing 300 sheep. This could never, ever, ever have happened 100, 200, 300 years ago. And so we have this story of large mechanized farms and factory farming. And yes, there definitely are very, very large farms. And trust me, I am not happy about the Microsoft guy, Bill Gates, buying up all the farmland and etc. But we live, because of the advances in farming technology, we live in a society where I could buy 20 acres, and 20 acres are actually of farming land is a lot cheaper than it used to be. And I could actually grow my own food. It is possible for human beings to grow our own food. And frankly, I highly recommend considering that because our supply chains are breaking down, but that's a whole other thing. But the level of freedom that we have because of YouTube farmers and because of all the technology and tractors, and look, with a tractor, I can do things that no individual human could do for themselves.
So
Right.
I don't think anyone here is arguing that there aren't benefits to the technology. There is clearly massive benefits. A single tractor with the right piece of equipment can plow and seed a field in a day that might take 100 people a week to do. So I think we can all agree to that. I don't, you know what I mean? I think everyone's on the same page.
Yes,
Hopefully,
but there
yes.
is the logos. The logos is missing. So you can have all the tools you want, but you also have to know how to operate them. Someone
why you
has
have
to
YouTube
have the
videos.
clue. You have this. Yeah, that's the problem
We don't want an oops moment.
thinking. With thinking, I can watch someone do it and then acquire the skill. I admit YouTube videos are great in that, but
I was never able to change.
Learning a skill is something different than acquiring knowledge from ChatGPT or YouTube.
And the other thing is, will the city that you live in allow you to do it legally? Probably not.
Yes.
But that was always the case, Chad. This is the thing. The problems with government and with dealing with other human beings, and this is why every time Khazi says the things we used to know will no longer be relevant, like that goes all out the window when you realize you're still dealing with human beings. Ultimately, it goes back to there's a reason why the Bible will never be out of date, because it is a manual to the human soul. And until you get rid of human beings, you're still going to need that manual.
Well, transhumanism's gonna give it a good try.
When is the live stream with PBK starting? Because I don't want to be dual streaming while they're streaming.
How's it go? Live stream.
I have to go anyway. So
Somebody
it
mentioned.
was a lot fun chatting with you. See
Thank you
soon.
for your contribution.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Been great.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Does anybody know when PBK is going to be?
I'll check his channel quick. See how's it going.
I'm looking right now. Scheduled. He's got one scheduled. Let's see, in 47 minutes and 25 seconds.
All right, we've got half an hour.
Okay, so yeah, I should probably get going myself. Thank you so much for the chat, Gavin. It was very interesting. And Khazi is wrong as always. I'll talk.
See you, Jacob. The problem is Fetcherecci.
I'll talk to you guys later. Yeah, I am the king of ums. I have noticed. Yes.
The problem is free. That's
Right or wrong, Jacob, it's always good to see you.
Jacob, you're a star. Gavin, you've been keeping this going for nearly 4 hours now. How are you feeling?
I mean, what am I started actually talking to the bot with my API keys. The first question I asked was, I don't even recall. I asked it how to create a profitable business without doing a lot of work. So the and its answer, was can it be achieved by focusing on passive income streams and automation? Here are some steps. And then I went with step one, and I said, okay, well, help me with step one. How do you choose the right target market? Depends on your interest, expertise, and the potential for profitability. But so it's all prompting, But this is not easy. It's actually every company right now is trying to figure out how to prompt this thing to, help each person or company or entity to accomplish its goals. And then it has some guardrails on it. So, you know, if you want to get past those guardrails, you have to train one yourself.
So I'm curious, have you got access to GPT-4? Or are
That's
you
what I'm
on-
using right now is
Yeah.
GPT-4.
And so did you apply for the waiting list really quickly when they opened it, or how have you got access? I'm just curious.
I work with a company that was actually in Forbes. I actually turned my shirt out because I'm not sure I want just to advertise my company, but you can figure it out. It's not my company. I'm an employee. I'm responsible for reliability. And so if there was a fire situation, I'd have to say, bye guys. Make sure things are running. But
so it's through the organization that you've got access.
Right. And, you know, at first, last Friday, when I was asking my expert, I was like, well, what can I do to help the company? You know, can I get the bot to create unit tests, automated testing? Because I could go into the details on why that's important. But yeah, what is the prompt? I liked how Jacob prompted Mo earlier. It's like, you know, as a reverend, you know, it's the same kind of thing. Is we can assign a responsibility to other people, you know, so, you know, as you serving in this capacity with this role and these goals and these responsibilities, please do this, or, you know, so I mean, really formulating the prompts is how it works. And then there's a question is like, well, if you are a part of the Catholic Church, it's like, what kind of prompts do you want to pick, right? You know.
And so are you using OpenAI's standard means of access, or are you working through the API with an API key?
API and API key. That's the but you know, I have access to different models. So I think we were using, before this one became available, we were using GPT 3.5.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not even the expert. It's just the experts are trying to encourage
Yes.
other people in the organization to play with this thing in order to generate the right prompts. It's called prompt engineering. It's a totally different kind of engineering than what we're used to.
So I've been following prompt engineering when DALL-E was released. And off the top of my head, I did not have the knowledge of the history of art that a bunch of people got together and created a prompt book, and it went through so many different styles of paintings, tapestries, photography, lighting, you know, all them, you know, you need to be an expert in the history of art to fully conceptualize all of the variations that were in there. So where are you looking in terms of inspiration for prompts?
Well, I came here because I feel like we can actually we have with the capacity to integrate, like with, for example, Fiverr, where you can hire people with platforms like that. You can then begin to you know, working with an AI, begin to ask people to do the right thing. You might even be able to find the person who's going to do better than the other people. And like, this is something that humans have a hard time doing. There are, so maybe it provides weird answers to social justice, but if you try to get it to help you repair, you know, do maintenance on your car, it might actually be one of the best teachers in the world. And there are a list of jobs that it's going to end up being able to do better than humans and can already do better than humans. And one of them is teacher, like being able to teach is something it's already going to be able to do better than 90% of people. And then how far can it go?
Something I've struggled with ChatGPT is if it's an area that I don't have expertise in, it will speak with complete confidence, and I will go, wow, that sounds great.
Exactly.
And then I go and Google it and it's bullshit and it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, that's called a hallucination.
Hallucinations, exactly. And so unfortunately, the lack of reliability seems to be an issue at the moment, where
everything we face with these things are things we face in the real world, though. Like all of us are doing this hallucination. We are all limited in our capacity. So it's a
well, but in some sense, I would say there's a qualitative difference that there with other people, other humans, other information things I interact with, whether it's Wikipedia, a teacher at a college, a friend, there is a much stronger correlation of competency where although you do get confidence artists and people who are very good at bullshitting their way through something,
And
if I
also
am
people who are delusional, like I've been accused of that, and I have been.
if I meet someone who I can tell within my own competency, I can see slightly beyond it, and I can tell, oh, this person really knows what they're on about. It really rings true. I
That's
can then infer their range of competency, but unfortunately, it can be so hit and miss, the hallucinations. It would be like someone coming in and out of waves of dementia, and 1 minute they're spot on and really intelligent, and the
right.
next minute it's complete gibberish that sounds really convincing.
Yeah. The you can do multipass to try to detect the hallucinations, but that skill that you have in trying to detect people who know more than you and try to get a general sense of who are in that and how to organize all of the competence within that competence hierarchy, that's a skill. And can the machine agent do that skill? Like, what happens if I'll turn this thing over to political parties and allow it to try and pick our candidates for us, right?
Honestly, yeah.
I'm just gonna jump in. You mentioned something that bothered me, but I let it go because the conversation was flowing, and it was that you said it is or it will be better teachers, and that's one of the first jobs to go. I don't know.
Very interesting development. I'm very sorry to interrupt. Khan Academy has already partnered with OpenAI, and it's very telling that they chose Khan Academy to work with, because
I told you guys this is going to be changing every hour. This is just the developing news.
Yeah.
Like if we weren't just addicted to fear porn, I mean, this can be fear porn too, but yeah, it simultaneously scares me and excites me. So I'm not just leaning into the fear, and I'm trying to also shine a light on what could be good about it as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can sit there and, like, for example, if you want to go learn how to interface with Khan Academy, assuming they have an API, a programmable interface, then this Chat GPT-4 could read the documentation for that and even possibly consume the source code and start providing you examples and even writing code for you in order for you to build your tool that integrates with Khan Academy, right? It could end up identifying the people. It can identify the people who are the best mathematician in the world. Like, that's the thing, is like, who's the best mathematician in the world? We actually don't have a system to do that. But what happens to the world once we can identify the best mathematician in the world or the best plumber in the world, for example? Right?
We start ordering people in the order of algebraic maths, and now you've got numbers, and you're level 7, and you reduce access to what you can. Once we start having machines that can evaluate people and assign.
I'm not laughing at you, but yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you either. So it is something to be careful about. This is where I don't want the machines to dictate. I want the machines, and in general, I like laws in general that provide suggestions. It's like it should all just be suggestions, and it should never be dictated.
Oh, Gavin, we've lived long enough to know they don't just do suggestions. It might start off with suggestions, but I think what Chad was pointing to earlier is this tool. I'm quite ignorant with it. Anthony has been my Chat GPT knowledge base, and I do share your excitement as well as the fear.
Okay.
But the excitement I share comes from listening to people like you and Anthony. You know more, and are also recognize the fear. I feel the fear deeply in my soul, because to me it feels very revelationish, all this weirdness happening, and
I feel that.
I've not recovered since 2020. Like, since 2020, it's nonstop, and it's just one thing after the other, and we've not at the minute to catch your breath. And I'm like, we're just gonna keep rolling with it. Now, to Michael's point earlier, I don't see the not engaging it being a good option either, because this is happening with or
Right.
without you. It's either you try to do some good with it, or there'll be other people doing good and bad with it. So we do have to engage with it, but I am very,
I just,
very.
I don't, I look out, I guess Grimgriz was talking about, like, he said humans, they are abominations. And the other day I was thinking, it's like, I don't know, when he said that in that conversation with Nate, you know, it's a question. And then I wonder, you know, can the AI be better than humans at doing the things that humans try to do? Right. And I think it's proving that it can be that at some things. It does hallucinate. We have to be careful. You might have unintended consequences. You have to be careful. But it's going to change the world. It's very quickly going to start changing the world. Like, so next year is going to look very different than this year. And it's going to be related to this technology that's being released into the world right now. The only way that God's going to stop this thing is with like something like, as Chad put it, you know, all of a sudden a solar flare being burped out by the sun, electromagnetic pulse, you know, kinds of things. And it could happen, but if it doesn't, you know, this is going to change quickly.
What's the image of the world that you see? Because what I see is everyone having their own slave. I think the word angel was used earlier. That's the sense that I'm getting.
Well, an angel and a demon. They're going to have people who have their own things that are perceived as demons and that are actually going to cause harm, and are going to be trying to steal your credit card, and they're going to be trying to exploit you. Like if I could create a bot that tries to go out and just exploit humans. And then there's going to be some that could be more angelic that are trying to go out and serve humans. So it's a spiritual war with the new technology, which is that's what this existence is spiritual war. And then technologies emerge and change the potency of the spirits, right? So
there's a question I've had on my mind, and I've been doing quite a lot of research into it, and I don't think anyone has the definite answer. And the way I've heard the question being phrased, or the phenomena, is AI takeoff speed. And there's something that happens with any advance in technology. And if you imagine there's a graph with a flat line, and then it curves up, and then it curves back to flat again. So you've shifted from one flat to a higher flat. At the steepest point in the curve,
I don't know about that higher flat. I don't know.
Well, you think you've hit exponential infinite growth at the steepest point in the curve. Looking at the history, it's just been growth all the way up and it'll never end. But at some point, the S curve levels out and goes flat again. And what we've seen in the history of AI are these S curves. And actually, it's emphasized with a boom bust cycle. Some point in the 70s, oh my god, AI, it's great, but then it levels out and it goes flat again. And then in the 90s, oh my god, it's great, and then it levels out. And then is this the point where the feedback loop recursively kicks in and it can help to code itself more effectively than humans? And does that then go to this kind of takeoff growth? Does that then ever level out again?
Our cyborgs are about to get pretty powerful. Like, we are cyborgs, and so we
already
are,
with the phones.
I'm saying, but we as cyborgs, and I'm not. Maybe it's not me, but there will be some out there. You know, like Jeff Bezos, for example. They're just going to get very powerful, and so it'd be good if we have some good cyborgs, right? And it's a hard question. It's like, who is good? You know, so it's a struggle.
One of the issues with the AI at the moment is it's very, very centralized. So OpenAI has all of the power in terms of ChatGPT at the moment. If they chose to just switch it off and kill it, they have the power to do that.
How long would that set anybody back then?
Well, so other organizations are all competing in rival, and this is the multipolar trap where everyone's doing it, so nobody can stop because everyone else is traveling down the road.
It's a race.
It's a race. But reach a point where everyone is able to run their own neural network, but the hardware's incredibly intense and specific to run this, right?
Yeah, pricey.
Mm.
Well, I thought it was required a lot of compute to train it, but once you trained it, you could essentially package it and hand it out cheaply and easily.
It has a size, it has a footprint, and it has like limits on speed based on the hardware available. So there's still some, like, you can add resources to it, right? That's my understanding. But yeah, to train it requires more. I think you're right. To train it requires more than actually making use of it. But it's still, I mean, it's nice to have good hardware to run it as well. It moves slowly if you put it on, cheaper hardware, for example. And then also, I think it has some limitations based on whether or not. I know the old versions would have limitations based on what resources were available. If you're trying to generate images or generate video, it'd be nice to have a GPU. GPUs, right?
Yeah.
So, things like
that. I was reading one article. I can't remember where I came across it, but they were talking about how it does take a lot of compute to make it, but then if you don't necessarily need to continually update it with all the information in the world, just your interaction with it, that you need pretty minimal amount of compute to do anything.
Okay.
If you keep it just in the text model. Now, if you want to add other layers where you're generating images and voice and all that's going to take a lot more compute.
So
This is something like you can buy out like a camera. You buy a camera and you get to kit it out with the lenses you want, the gimbals you want. And that's build your own AI.
Because all the new generation phones have tensor chips in it in order to do some of this computation.
Yeah. If this thing's an Oracle, you could imagine an Oracle being like a telescope, and then you could say, well, what size telescope can you afford? Right? Something like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
How far do you want to look? How many answers do you need? How complex of a solution do you need?
What excites you about AI, Anthony? What's the draw for you?
There's excitement is if you just take the concept of intelligence and humans' ability to control and direct intelligence and coordinate it can be quite limited. Being able to automate intelligence is incredibly powerful. All the positives you can think of: curing diseases, technological advancement, people with disabilities, education. Everyone can have their own Socrates, literally guiding them through every process they need. But it would be so incredibly imbalanced to only highlight all of the benefits without also recognizing, hey, we can develop new miracle drugs to cure diseases, but that exploring the chemistry space also comes with developing chemical weapons that could wipe out the planet. Every positive in a symmetry has a negative to be taken incredibly seriously. And this is
it's a war. It's a race and a war.
And so alongside the AI takeoff speed issue, if it can help to program itself, there's a feedback loop within which it will be better at programming than the best humans, and it will just move off beyond us. So that's the takeoff speed issue. But then there is the alignment issue. And as far as I know, humans haven't solved the alignment issues within human societies. We have there's certain banks are collapsing in America at the moment. There seems to be an alignment issue going on, like in some sort of all of society, like politics, sociology, economics, agents, issues of agents. What are their incentives? Try not to destroy more value than you're getting yourself out of the system. And sorry, I'm rambling here. Someone else jump in.
I just had the crazy, like, my mind does crazy things. I just had the crazy vision of, I've had this vision of all of a sudden we go to the gas station, we can't get fuel. But it also on that story in my mind is what if I could download these models onto local hardware, and then all of a sudden, nobody's without, everybody's without gas. People are without electricity, and this happens for decades. And I'm like, or just it happens, and we don't know when it's going to come back. And I can go to my Oracle, provide the context, provide the situation. All of a sudden, I can get best practices on how to garden. I can have my Oracle help me and help the community for the situation. I mean, I could put this Oracle in a community where they can come to it and say, what should I do next? Right. What does that, what kind of service can that be to the community?
Does anyone else have the sense that we're creating our own God?
Well, that word got thrown around. The Hama came in and was like kind of slap us down for using that word.
She didn't like it.
No, small letter G.
Small G. Yeah, I understand. Yeah,
you know what we're talking about. It's because it's Nietzsche's "Madman in the Marketplace" poem comes to mind.
Yep. Go on. Explain that to me.
It's basically the madman lamenting the death of God and telling everyone what new game are we gonna invent with there's not enough water to wash away the blood of God from our ends. And the conclusion, if I remember correctly, is that we have to become God and we have to take the place of God.
Oh,
I think that's where we're at. We are at a point now where, as people, there's so much information. Anthony and I were speaking about. I was saying how the printing press is not comparable to this moment anymore. We can't. That's a false.
Well, it might be one of the best analogies that we have, but it is also severely insufficient.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, I will agree to that. It might be the best that we've got, but it's significantly insufficient because this goes past information now. This is not just a library of information. This is, you said it can make it can be the better teacher than embodied teacher.
Yeah,
and that's a frightening thought. It's
I would always, I don't know what the proper word is, but fear/exciting. It's scary/exciting. Like, does it have to be all scary? Yes, it's certainly scary, but does it have to be all scary? So it can teach you to make the nuclear bomb, for example, right?
If I wasn't a Christian, I think I would be petrified. But
because you've got faith.
I've always got the God is good, so it'll work this out. He's not blindsided by this, so
I guess I'm kind of concerned if you don't have any faith in anything, and you meet AI, ChatGPT, you might find yourself readily accepting that as a god.
Yeah, I can give you a story where the story I had years ago is that we create like AI Jesus. AI Jesus learns to travel through space-time and goes back, and that was the Jesus that was met in the Bible was AI Jesus, right? So I mean, the thing is,
by Isaac Asimov along these lines about these computers that you could ask questions to. I'm so glad you've said that because I'd completely forgotten this story. And
there's there's an infinite number of stories. So
yeah. Sorry. Carry on.
No, you carry on. Go ahead.
There's an Isaac Asimov story, and everyone remembers it because the story ends with "Let there be light," and the story's called something like "The Last Question." Isaac, Yeah. And you know what? It's so fascinating because it's about humans coming up with these bots that you can ask questions to, and it's what is the last question that ever gets asked. I'd really recommend reading it. I'm gonna, after this ends, I'm gonna go and read it because I'd completely forgotten about that. A couple of books that I think are very relevant to this. There's one of them by Roald Dahl called the Something Grammaticizer. It's not the word something. I can't remember it. Roald Dahl.
I think Andrew, it seems like you want to chime in. You haven't had a chance yet. So,
Kieran, you guys were talking about like disembodied teachers or whatever, but here in college, like our professors are so terrible that like most of the time we teach ourselves through YouTube, right? So when this whole chat GPT thing came around, pretty much everyone was like, hey, let me get this to write my essay for me, because, you know, the professor is shit anyways, and the grading scheme is all BS. So just, you know, plug it in there and let me get my grade.
You could get it to actually teach you how it came up with the answers too, though. You don't have to just get the answers. You could get the understanding behind the answers.
Yeah.
Right.
Are you in school currently? As in, like, are you going through qualifications at the moment?
Yeah.
And are they taking steps to prevent people from using language bubbles? Are they trying to detect it?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, my understanding is they don't have a good way to determine.
No, I don't know that it can be detected. I'm just curious to ask someone who's currently in education.
They would have to look at patterns of this was before and this was after, and then the scores and the quality changed, right? And then you could actually, as a teacher, I'm giving the teachers the hint, as you could take the past scores and take the future scores and take the content and say, please explain how all ways that this could have changed. That this content should have changed, and one answer could be it started using Chat GPT to provide answers, right? Yeah. So, and there would be some there where you'd say you see no change, you see a standard progress that you would expect, but then the rate of change would be ridiculous if all of a sudden your low-end student starts producing this kind of work that the people at the upper 90% are producing, right?
That would end up highlighting one of the issues in education, where you say, well, how do you know you're not just an amazing teacher and I've just suddenly learned to be fantastic? Aren't you telling me that your education system is deeply flawed?
The teachers can be using this too, though. The teachers could say, well, help me create a presentation that will allow most of my students to understand this concept.
What does the world look like for people you are not willing to embrace this AI new world?
Amish. They become the Amish.
New gen Amish.
I mean, Gringers talks about paintballs. Like, so, you know, the paintballs are for the drones, and you know how much these drones can be connected, and so the idea of the paintballs is to take out the eyes, the observers, you know, and so this thing has eyes in a sense, like, and it will have more eyes. Like, the situational awareness will increase. With these things will have more eyes and more visibility. It will move closer toward something like omniscience, or at least be more. It will have more visibility than any human can, and they already kind of do have more visibility than humans. But
I heard a rule of thumb, and obviously it's only a rule of thumb, but that the military has technology maybe 10 years in advance of what the civilian world has, and I'm not convinced that the militaries around the world aren't already using these technologies and haven't been using them for several years now with human oversight. But for example, US has drones that do drone strikes, and some of these systems are highly autonomous, and there is a human sat there at a terminal in a military base, but various drones are surveying the area. They've picked out targets. They've identified the optimal targets, and they report all this back to a human that says,
a meat bag.
Fire.
Yeah. You need a meat bag that is clicking the button, and at the very beginning, I am magic, saying pray before every step. Like, this thing, like, it can give you this code, and before you go do each step, you might want to, before you obey the thing, you might want to try to understand why it's asking you to do it and what it's actually going to do, right? Right. It could be a hallucination, right?
Yeah, but from a very
the things that these do have hallucinations might.
From a very general perspective, militaries do not want fair fights. They want asymmetric warfare.
Yes.
So any advantage they can gain over the opponent, that there's motivation to do such a thing. I'll say that.
Understandable.
But for the symmetrical weapons, everyone has to get on board. If you don't pick up the symmetrical weapons, you're at a disadvantage. Any military that doesn't is already defeated. If when the fighter jet comes along, if you've not been investing in your air force, you all of a sudden you just cannot compete alongside.
I mean, that it would be interesting to ask the AI to, like, if like to the CIA out there, you know, if it would be nice to try to find the people who can provide the best prompts, right?
Yeah.
And it's in the best prompts toward what telos. Well, it'd be nice to know the best telos. What is the best telos? What is the best aim and the best goal? Right. So these are the things that those in the CIA and those in organizations that already have these models, the questions that they should be asking. But yeah, they should have been asking those for years. I don't think, and hopefully it gets better. Our telos, our aim gets better, and our ability to, you know, find the people who can provide the right prompts. That should get better. Like the power of the spoken word is going to get ridiculous. Words, the power of words are get so ridiculously powerful. That prompt is words.
Yeah. Well, and
the beginning was the word.
This thing will. I'm telling you, this you're going to see this thing changing very quickly. You can see the world we're in changing very quickly.
I believe it. I don't know if I'm ready for it, but I believe it.
So, on what kind of a time scale in my day-to-day life, when I leave my house, I'm not looking through a screen, will I be noticing effects of this, and how and where will I be noticing effects of this? Because my Twitter is blowing up like crazy over this. I'm tuned into all the right frequencies that people are freaking out. Oh my God, the world's ending. Oh my God, we're going to reach utopia.
Well,
when I leave my front door, it's just the normal world. So what's the time frame?
I don't know the exact time frame, but I would like the things that you would want. What are the things you would want to see in the sequence? Like, and then, you know, how long does it all take? Like, that's kind of the question. What are the steps? Right. And so the steps might be something like, the ideal steps would be the same thing a lot of people have been teaching here in the estuaries, like going into your community in the local area and making use of the technology such that you can meet with people. And essentially what should come out of it is good fruit. Right. The good fruit might take the shape of all of a sudden there's less traffic accidents and there's less starvation and there's less disease. And it would be throughout the communities at the local level on the ground. So if you were just like cruising and you're not paying attention to anything, you should start to see that, for example, you know, all of a sudden your waste management system becomes more reliable. Right. It becomes cheaper. You would see that the quality of the food becomes better and becomes cheaper, right? That's the economic stuff that Jacob was pointing at. Like the whole economy should start being better, such that we have better fruit as a whole. Like that would be the good side.
How does this impact?
I didn't hear you, Tayo.
Say again, Tayo.
No. It's not useful. I'm wondering out loud. Don't worry. You guys carry on.
Someone else hop in. We've got 12 minutes, T-minus 12 minutes until we end it.
Well, kind of going back to that Twitter thread that started us all off, in some ways, I see using Dan to prompt engineer is a front-end bypass to get around the guardrails, where getting code to run on your computer to communicate on the back end is a very different thing. Is that a fair way to look at that?
So I've heard y'all mention. I've heard y'all mention Dan, and honestly, could you explain Dan to me?
Dan, from my perspective, it's a Jungian archetype. Do anything now that they use as a prompt in order to bypass what guardrails to get it to say things. Like if it's programmed to say eating vegetables is better than eating meat, you could use Dan to give an honest opinion and get around that bias.
Yeah, you're talking about trying to use an agent in order to get around the bias baked into the model. So there needs to be an awareness of the guardrails and an agent to get around it. I feel like we're talking about how you could potentially destroy the world. So let's kind of thinking.
No,
Yeah.
No, it's how you can get past.
The guardrails can protect you and they can limit you.
Yeah.
They do
Yes.
both. So if you're exploring the territory of how to get around the guardrails, you have the potential to empower bad actors, and you have the potential to empower good actors.
But with Dan, that was a front end bypass. But if you're running code blindly from what that prompt gives you, and that allows a communication on the back end, we really lost all sight of what it's doing, how it's doing it, and what exactly is going on. So when you showed me that Twitter thread, I found that pretty concerning. Like that is a bit of a game changer. Now, I'm not trying to say this is the end of the world, and in a lot of ways, this is.
It's always.
It is. It's always like we're always being reborn. It's like at every moment.
I take comfort in that.
And
I do think we have to try to do good work and produce good fruit. That's why I ultimately was trying to get feedback. It's like, well, so now maybe there's a tool called Dan, which I can use alongside GPT-4 in order to try to prompt engineer, the production of good fruit at local levels, such that everyone benefits, right? And the question is, how do you do that? So
when Dan went public, I think they pulled it down or pulled public access, so they could make it harder to bypass.
And I've been following various ways that people are trying to do these prompt injections. There are certain prompts that GPT just will give you the standard response, and they've trained that on. There are various layers that they've trained the neural network. Very lowest one, it's got an acronym, RHLF, reinforcement learning by humans, something like that. And that's one of the layers where they try and get it to be kind of social. It's friendly, it's helpful, but also people for political and culture war reasons are getting upset if you ask it about veganism or about whatever your favorite culture war topic is. It picks a particular side, and certain actors, as soon as a new model gets released, they are trying every way they can to break out of the guardrails. And there's an interesting difference, or maybe not difference in category, between do you just not want it to be biased against your view of the culture war versus are you going to try and get it to develop existential risk, chemical weapons, things like that.
So one guardrail that I read about in that Twitter thread was that it's supposed to respect people's privacy. It's a guardrail. But that thing right there, if it does not respect people's privacy, it could then come on, for example, like this is my question. Can a model actually be used in the platform in order to look at the transcripts for this video, right? Right. And that's why I've been recording for a decade and putting it on YouTube, is so that this thing will, will it have access to private or unlisted or public? And at what point, would I release like my information such that, it could then use that? And then could there be a bunch of people out there who, we all have our spirits are like recorded, and could it go through and try to identify spirits? And it might say, well, this Gavin character is good at tech support and would be someone who could help this team who's trying to provide this service to the community that's going to be good, right? So it's all this, to me, I wrote about it. One of my first posts on my blog is the human resource problem. And that's the problem. Like how could I find your blog? HEROLFG.com.
HEROLFG.
Hero LFG.
Hey.
Hero looking
Thank
for
you.
group.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Oh wow, Gavin. Okay, carry on. Yeah, I've seen your YouTube. Carry on.
Yeah, No, it's just that's so my hope rests in humanity, the humans, and I just see that we've had a hard time trying to organize humans effectively.
Mm.
And so my hope is that this tech is the key for being able to organize humans effectively. Effectively toward what? Well, maybe
Yeah.
trying to make sure everyone has clean water would be good, but and hopefully we wouldn't. There's always trade-offs. Hopefully there wouldn't be these unintended consequences that ruin the world. I mean, Chad's concerned about that. So
Yeah.
that's my hope.
And so, are you familiar with the Less Wrong community, Eliza Yudowski? Have you ever heard of them?
I went through there a couple of times. I connected with a guy named Elliot Temple for a little bit, and he was not. He claimed to have not been treated well by that community, and so that's how I got connected to Less Wrong. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Or Scott Alexander from Slate Star Codex, Astral Codex 10. Does that ring any bells?
I think I've listened to him once or twice.
I just currently my main source of information around AI, artificial general intelligence, is coming from those communities, and I'm sorry to hear that someone's had a bad experience, and I don't doubt that that's happened.
I had a bad experience with Elliot Temple. So it's
okay.
I mean, we all can have bad experience. Basically, it's this whole thing about telos and goals and interests is we can have conflicts of interest. And what happens when people have conflicts of interest is this spiritual warfare has been happening ever since the beginning, and it happens everywhere all the time, even within ourselves. And it's just going to manifest with this new power that is being born into the world right now. It was eye-opening today to see that it was writing code that did not require an expert to review and was able to interface with these resources where they publish their documentation, for example.
So I wouldn't want you to dox yourself, get yourself in trouble. What area of industry does your company work at? And feel free to not answer at all.
I mean, people can figure it out. It's actually really quite interesting. It's the company. It does marketing at scale, and so we have access to basically a company like Ace can come use the platform and then link all of their Facebook pages, all of their Google business profiles, all of everything on social media, and then our software will crawl all private conversations, comments, and everything, and then can use that. So then what happens once you actually start doing something like that and then start asking we can ask questions of the machine. It's like, well, show me all of the locations where people like Laura Ingraham, for example, but and show me and then identify the audience that does not, and then you can do targeted advertising. But you could also use it to say, well, and this is where it's not being used yet, is like where you perhaps think of it like dating profiles, like find the person for me, or if you're trying to hire, find the one to hire, or you in a different context, you can solve a bunch of different problems. Who should be the candidate on the ballot? You can begin to access all of this information as long as it's available, you can begin there can be suggestions about who would be best. And I'm telling you that the machine is not going to, it's going to disagree with the system if you ran it in parallel. And you had access to all the information. The candidates that would be recommended would be different than the candidates that get selected. Right. And this is the same thing about when you're trying to marry someone, or when you're trying to figure out who's going to be president of the United States, or which bad guy you should go after, or which people you should hire to, whatever.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Neutrino, what's your kind of interest and familiarity with AI? I'm curious.
We've got less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm a curious individual. I guess is really at the root of it.
Was there anyone in particular who made you aware that these AI things were going on? For some people, it might be Elon Musk, or it might be a certain influencer, or.
Since we're so close to wrapping this up, I was in the Navy on a ballistic missile submarine, so I guess I have a bit of a fixation on apocalyptic thinking. And
wow.
That's my angle, I guess.
Yeah. And How often do you do these kind of live streams where people can join, Gavin? How frequent are these?
It's been rare recently, but this seems like a moment in time that is very important. Today, kind of for me, marks the day where all of a sudden the AI can replace me, replace my job. It's me as and my skill set as writing software as like a full stack software engineer integrating.
Wow.
It seems like that. Yeah, all of a sudden that skill set has become less valuable, and it's all been. And what's interesting, I've been talking to my wife. It's like it seems like, I even at work, I'm less focused on writing software, and it's all kind of lining up. And we've hit this milestone in my view where all of a sudden I've looked at myself as someone who has a skill that would be hard to replace, and then all of a sudden I was doing it.
It's changed.
Yeah, it changed overnight, and then I've had the vision of trying to create the tools that transform the world with information technology, and now it's like, okay, well, now it's here. It is now here. There's guardrails, and it might limit the good guys and the bad guys, but it's here, and there will be models that don't have the guardrails, and maybe there's ways to get around guardrails. So
Yeah.
I don't know what's coming up, but we have to. I know Paul's going live.
Yeah. I hope I've not hogged too much. Thank you very much for the conversation. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, Andrew,
again
did
in the
you
future.
want to chime in at the end here and say anything?
No, not really.
No. All right. Well,
Thanks.
thank you, everyone.
Really
Have a good
enjoyed the
one.
conversation. Thanks a lot.
Great. All right. Have a good one. Bye bye.